because this time we really want to focus on what does it really take to implement a digital fueling at your airline and your interplanar company. So this is really the goal that we want to achieve today. For that, the circle of speakers is a little bit smaller than the last time. So we have 2 speakers today representing an airline, that's Cathay Pacific, and an interplanar that is Shell Aviation. They jointly started a digital fueling project in summer of 2020, so in the midst of the global pandemic. So some of you might think that's probably not the best time to start something like that, but we will convince you of the opposite today. And I assure you that the first question that I'm going to ask David, that's the representative of Cathay, who will be joining us today. Why the hell did they do it in such testing times for the aviation industry? So without further ado, I would really like to invite Johnson from Shell Aviation and David from Cathay Pacific, as I said, on stage to get this whole thing rolling, because I see the number of participants is growing constantly. So I think you're, as I said, you're all waiting to get this thing going. And here we go. Johnson, thank you very much for being with us today.
Hi, Robin. Thank you for inviting.
No, it's a pleasure. It's on my side. Thank you, David. Hey.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
So with us 3 being on stage, this is basically the setup you will see throughout the 3 sessions we're going to do today. So the first session is going to be a joint session with the 3 of us, talking about the project in every little detail that you can imagine. And after that, we will continue with David to look a little bit more on the topic from an airline perspective, and then over to Johnson to do the same thing from an interplanar perspective. Mm-hmm. During all sessions, that's directed at you, the audience, you can go to the question tab on the right-hand side of your screen. I hope that you can see it, and you can type in questions whenever you want to. We will try to answer them at the end of each session, so we will accumulate them and then try to answer them as good as possible at the end of every session. So I think, guys, are we ready for the first session?
Yep.
Yep, ready when you are.
All right. Then, as already said, the idea behind this session is really to walk the audience through the whole project that the 2 companies of you did, and with having you on stage here as the 2 project leaders, let's say. During that time, it's really a pleasure to have you to talk about all that. And of course, it's not only about the project itself that will come later in the session, but also how did you approach it? Why did you do it? What were the decisions you needed to take before actually engaging with the other parties to start the project? So as I already said in the introduction, the first question for today, David, that is directed at you. And again, a massive thank you to you for being with us today. So why the hell did you start to think about something as digital fueling, or why did you start a digital fueling project in the midst of the 2020 COVID pandemic? It was a really testing time for the aviation industry, as we all know, and as we all still know. So what were you thinking, guys?
Okay. So first of all, let me introduce myself. This is David from Cathay Pacific. So I'm from the Cathay Pacific IT department, and I'm the solution lead on that on this digital refuel project. So I'm so glad that Robin invites me to this webinar to share our experience with you all. Okay, so Robin, back to your question. Actually, this whole digital refueling idea was actually illustrated by one of our projects in Cathay Pacific that we started in year about 2017. So about 3 or 4 years ago, for the digitalization of our flight operation, which including an in-house developed EFF application. So just for those people who are not familiar with the term EFF, it stands for electronic flight folder. So it means, with the traditional way, the flight plan is in paper format. So we would like to digitalize it and create a digital platform. So we have created a digital platform so that it has enabled a lot of new opportunities for us to introduce new technology into our flight operations. The project does not only digitalize some of our existing process, but also help linking our existing business model with the new help from the new technology. Digital refuel is one of the new opportunities that we can see and are already planned in our roadmap before the pandemic period. Cathay Pacific has started the engagement with Singapore Shell on the e-fueling during the pandemic period, which is a difficult period for the whole industry. But there are 3 reasons why we want to go ahead and start the e-fueling project under such a difficult period. Okay, so the first one, we can foresee that this is the right direction to go, and this must be the trend for the whole industry in the future, and the company will benefit from it in the long term. That's the first reason. And the second reason is, during this period, protecting our pilot is also very important. So this will help reduce the number of unnecessary direct connection with, a crew from, someone else. And also the third reason for us is during this difficult period, actually our number of flights is reduced. So it means we are not as busy as usual. So this is actually a good timing for us to do some trial, and also, a good timing for us to learn from the trial and do adjustment and improve our process and also our system during this period. Yeah, so that's why we choose to do it during this period.
All right. So thank you, David, for those insights. I think, yeah, as you said, if you've started the project so many years earlier, it makes sense, of course, to continue it with that and doesn't shy away from the pandemic. So kudos to you to sticking to your project plan at that point. And also for having engaged with us for that project. And yeah, that's connected to the second question I wanted to ask you. So normally we recommend to find a strong partner with a strong IT environment to do such a joint project. So this is, of course, directed at what interplaner you're choosing to do the digital fueling with first. So so why did you approach then Shell Aviation and not any other interplaner that you have contracted at the moment?
Okay. Yeah. So I think the answer is pretty straightforward. So first of all, CX has decided to use information design as our partner, and Shell has already integrated with the A-Fuel Hub already. So therefore, the decision was made immediately with any doubt that it has helped making the whole situation easier for us from the IT perspective and also from the management perspective. And also the result has actually proven that we have made the right decision on this approach.
All right. Right, thank you. So I think that's a very good point to bring Johnson into the conversation. So as David already said, so you started the integration project with our A-Fuel hub in the past in Europe with your SkyPet system to communicate with airlines like Lufthansa on European airports. So I guess it was always the plan to expand the use of this integration even further. Am I right with that? And of course, thanks for being with us. And at first, I give you the chance to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Robin. So hi everyone. My name is Johnson. So very happy to be here representing Shell Aviation. I work in the sales and marketing team. So you might be thinking, why is a sales and marketing guy doing this IT session, right? But I just like to share that we are all very integrated, right? So if IT does what they do without consulting with the guys on the ground, then I think you have a user unfriendly product, right? And I think this is also one of the big learnings that we have, right, as we go through all this integration. Firstly, Robin, I'd like to thank ID1, right, Information Design, for inviting us into this webinar. I think it's such a great honor for us to be here talking about the benefits of digitalization, especially for our industry, right, in these difficult times. Shell Aviation has always prided ourselves on operational efficiency, right? So I think very early on, I think sometime in 2016, we recognized the need to actually digitize our ground operations, right? So that we cut out as many manual processes as possible, right? And at the same time, realize some of these operational efficiency benefits that comes along with it, on top of what we already have, right? So such integration actually comes with benefits like data accuracy, time savings at the apron, and I think in the recent COVID world, right, social distancing becomes something achievable, right? If you imagine what goes on around a plane at the apron, there's a lot of people and vehicles moving around, right? The less interaction we can have, right, directly reduces the risk of our frontline workers contracting COVID-19, right, intentionally or unintentionally. So I think our goal here is always about operational efficiency, right, and helping the industry realize this efficiency through digitalization. So I think going back to your question, right, so about leveraging this integration with A-Fuel Hub further. So I think we did integrate our system with yours, right, based on a separate project before Cathay. And I think for this Cathay integration, what happened was using A-Fuel Hub was a Cathay decision, right? So from our point of view, SkyPet is very much system agnostic. Yeah. How we like to position ourselves is that as long as the customer is willing to integrate because they realize the benefits behind it, right? We are agnostic. We are agnostic about the system that you're using. We are able to then integrate with most, if not all, cloud-based systems, right? So, however, due to the work that we had in the previous project, and like what David said, we are already integrated with the A-Fuel Hub due to that. The integration became a lot simpler, right? So I think David can attest to this as well. Everything became much faster as well because I think we worked out quite a lot of kinks in the previous project. And I think all these learnings then get brought into the integration with Cathay, and I think that helped us achieve the go live a lot faster. So I think SkyPet. So I think just want to state that SkyPet is actually our Shell system for ground operations. We have already rolled it out throughout our entire network at about more than 100 sites, of which 78 of them are directly connected to the cloud, and therefore allows for this integration and cloud-based exchange of data. Right, so I think we leverage the IATA data standards as well, and I think that's what we've been doing in the previous project and the current one with Cathay. So the aim then is that in future, right, anyone who is willing to adhere to IATA data standards, right, we should be able to very quickly integrate given our current experience.
Okay, thank you. So just to sort that out for the audience once more. So of course we have SkyPet on the one hand side that you are offering a direct integration for airlines of whatever choice, you know. So you could also, of course, connect with them directly. But Cathay made the choice, of course, as an airline to go with the A-Fuel hub as a middleman at that point and integrate with that to basically have the flexibility to connect to other interplaners at the same time. And for you, Johnson and Shell, the huge advantage in that was that the integration was so much easier and actually already proven in a different project, and therefore so much faster when doing the project with Cathay in the end. But directing that question at David again first. So what is the real benefit of that for you to really? So why did you make the choice to select the A-Fuel hub as a middleman, or any hub as a middleman to connect to Shell? You could have gone for a direct integration. What is in that in terms of flexibility and ease of use for you? When making that choice?
Okay, yeah. So first of all, for Cathay Pacific, we have considered different options for the digital refueling. Like what you mentioned, one of the options is we can have a direct integration with into plane agent system. And also we can also through some other service to help us on the integration. But anyway, finally, we have chosen ID1 or the A-Fuel hub as our final solution. When actually before we make the decision, we have considered multiple factors. After considering all those factors, we have concluded A-Fuel is one of the best solutions or options for Cathay Pacific on the market. And you know, before the decision, we have considered the following factors. The first one is the complexity of the integration with different service provider over multiple channels. We would like to have one single solution for Cathay Pacific that we can expand our network with one single integration channel only in the future. Otherwise, it will be too complicated for us to manage. Also, this service provider is able to have some flexibility to help support some tailor-made configuration to help us to standardize the message content and also the message exchange flow. Because on the market, you know, we have different service provider, and you know, the functionality and the standard may be a little bit different, even though they all follow the IATA standard. So this is the first factor that we consider. And the second factor for us is, you know, we would like to enable maximum number of airports in the shortest period for us. You know, as you can imagine, for Cathay Pacific, we have covered a lot of airports over the world. So if we need to, you know, enable each airport one by one, it will take a very long time for us. But for the A-Fuel hub, because it has already established, you know, your network with several service provider, and also at multiple airports already. So you have saved us a lot of time and effort to try to enable a new airport for the e-fueling. Therefore, enable a new airport is really, you know, under the A-Fuel hub is making us the life much easier. Okay, and other than that, the third factor that we consider is the stability of the system. So this is a very important factor for us. Even though I would like to say, even though, for example, the system is down, we always have the fallback plan, which is, you know, we can always fall back to the manual process. But however, we would like to provide a good, experience to our pilots. So stability is also an important factor for us. So we understand Lufthansa has already been using the AFuel hub for a period of time already, and it has given us the confidence about the stability of the AFuel hub, and also is actually proven that the AFuel hub is very stable so far after we have using the servers. So we have never experienced any technical issue with AFuel hub since the go live. And finally, the last factor that we consider is the costing. Costing is not just talking about money. Time is also a very important factor. With the cooperation with ID1, it actually saved our ID team a lot of time and effort on the development. And also by comparing to the cost required to establish the network with different e-filling system one by one individually, and also the future and maintenance costs for all those integration channels, we believe the cost that we pay on AFuel is much more ideal for Cathay Pacific. Yeah, so that's why we choose to partner with ID1 on that digital refill.
All right, perfect, David. Thank you for those insights. Johnson, anything to add in terms of the ease of use and the benefits for Shell that you haven't mentioned in your previous answer?
Yeah, so I think just like I said earlier, right? From Shell's perspective, we are very much system agnostic. And typically, we don't usually get to make the choice of what system to use for the customer, right? So, for example, for Cathay, they made the decision, right? And they found out that we've integrated before, right? So they asked us to work with them for the integration with them. So specifically to this integration work, I think the key benefit then was really the savings on project timeline. Because of the similarities of our past experience. That said, we welcome all kinds of direct or indirect integration, right? So I think airlines typically make the decision on which one makes more sense for them, right? So I think we just heard from Cathay. And I think from us, from our perspective, the key at the end of the day is to get started, right? I think once you get started and you clear the first hurdle, and typically the first hurdle is management approvals, budget to be set aside, and then getting that first kickoff call in, right? I think subsequent connections will get easier, right? I mean, no doubt the integration with Cathay was much easier compared to the first one that we did with you guys, right? If you think about it, the number of Scrum calls we had, the project timeline, and the number of delays we had to keep reporting back to our respective management were also a very different picture, I would say. Yeah. So let's just put it this way: once the IT infrastructure protocols are in place, right, it gets easily replicated and scaled, right? I think the best analogy I can use in our everyday life will be WhatsApp, right? Once you have it and you use it, all they do is improve on it, right, with better features, newer features, and all that. So I think it's the same kind of concept, right, for us. So I think that's basically the ease of use, I guess. If you think about leveraging what we have done previously.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for both of you, scalability, that is really the term that should stick in the minds of the audience, because as soon as the integration is done once, of course there might be some problems connected to it. The efforts might be a little bit bigger, but as soon as the first integration is done, everything after that is just growing and growing, and the efforts are getting smaller and smaller with every airport that is connected. Exactly. So good. David, coming back to you, and you've listed, you made your decision path, let's say, very clear on why you choose the AFuel hub as a middleman with your previous answer. But we all know that for airlines, the IT infrastructure, the whole environment is always a little bit different? I know that there's market solutions that a lot of airlines are using, but in the end, every airline set up to manage the operational process is a little bit different here and there. And I think you already touched on that in your first question with the project, the digitalization project you started in 2015. So could you please give us a little bit more insight on how that set up at Cathay looks, and of course, especially with a focus on the digital fueling process to give the audience a better, maybe to find themselves a little bit better in your situation?
Yeah, sure. So as what you mentioned, this is related to, part of my answer for the first question. So a few years back, Cathay Pacific has started a project to review our flight operation procedure, which have never been changed for decades. Therefore, we started a new project to review the whole operational procedure from end to end. Sorry, excuse me, sorry. Okay. And then we analyze, how we can apply new technology to help improve or lean our existing operation. So we also have studied a few existing solutions on the market, but seems like none of them can really fulfill our requirements perfectly. As a result, Cathay Pacific decided to build our own solution with our in-house development team. However, the most important is not just about the EFF application itself that we created, but also with that application, we have created a whole new digital platform for our flight operation that is feasible to expand with new features. So digital refuel is one of the new features that we have, added to our digital platform once we decided to go ahead. And of course, integration with different digital refueling system provider will be another story. But when we start this project for digital refuel, we realized that it's not that simple, since Cathay Pacific have over 600 flights per day and covering a lot of airports in different countries. It will require a lot of effort for us to enable, the digital refuel for each airport from scratch, one by one. And once again, this is the reason why we choose to partner with ID1 to use their Aviation hub as our solution on the digital refuel.
All right, thank you. Very similar question directed at you, Johnson, looking at your Sky system that you've been developing with together with SAP over the last couple of years, and as already touched on the topic that you did the integration with the Aviation hub a couple of years ago, and having the word scalability in mind. What does it mean really in practical terms for you? So what does it take to connect a new airline via the Aviation hub for Shell and for the SkyPet system? Johnson? David, you can still hear me, right?
Yeah, I can still hear you. Probably Johnson got some connection issue, maybe.
Looks like it. First time we have connection problems. The last webinar, I still can't believe it, but it went through without any technical difficulties. But they had to, I guess.
Yeah.
He lost the connection. Okay. Good. Let's see if he's able to rejoin in a second.
Yeah, I think it's coming.
Hello.
Hey, welcome back.
That's a that's
technical issues.
First technical problems.
Yes, technical problems. We have many of them during integrations, right? I'm so sorry for that. But I lost you a little bit, Robin. I didn't really hear the last part of the question. You were asking something along the lines of something along the scalability, and then I kind of lost you there. Yeah.
So yeah, turning that scalability or translating that into practical terms. So what does it really mean for Shell and the SkyPed system to integrate with a new airline using the A-Fuel hub at the moment? So what kind of configuration is needed on your side, and with having the initial project setup in place, what's the effort at the moment really for you?
So I think the key here on what's needed. Okay, so I think we already have all the hardware and software in place, right? And I think one other key ingredient is the experience that we have already gained. I say this because when we talk about scalability, we have iterated through so many scenarios, right? Given our work, given the experience that we have through the work with Cathay, the work with before Cathay, right? And we have integrated with different types of systems so far and different airlines. And we all know different airlines have different ways of working, right? With different operational procedures, right? So every airline will have some sort of standard operating manual, right? Which they can't really deviate much from, right? So I think we have done so much iteration that I think this steep part of the learning curve in terms of integrating with a new airline is really behind us, right? And given where we are today, we find ourselves more in a position where we could even probably guide airlines who are interested in this area, right, to go from concept to reality, right, in a much shorter amount of time, right? Instead of the three of us trying to figure things out together, right? We already know what's the best practice in I would say 90% of the scenarios. Yeah, and then we adapt them depending on airlines' needs, airlines' operating procedure. Yeah, so I think it's then about speed, right? So what it takes for us is the willingness, I would say, from airlines to want to integrate, right? If you are willing to work with us, right, we are willing to work with you, right? And I think instead of spending a year and a half to achieve integration, right? If you have a cloud-based system already and you're willing to adhere to IATA data standards, right? I think it becomes a lot easier since a lot of the kinks have been all ironed out. Now we can even point out like key questions that need to be addressed between both parties. I think this was probably something that we went through with Cathay, right, David? We went through all the key questions that need to be answered pretty quickly. And I think we share a lot of learnings with each other, right? I think we share a lot of our past experience with Cathay, and I think that helped the whole process, right? So I think for newer airlines, we spent, I think there's a question, I think in terms of timeline, I think we spent probably half a year. I can't remember, I need to check my notes, but I think probably with the next airline who already has a cloud-based system, we might be able to do it faster. Of course, no guarantees, yeah, but I think if by and large the solution is 90% similar, I don't think it's going to be too difficult for us to work things out quickly. Yeah, so I think that's key, right? I think the right now we are at a point where we're looking for willing partners to continue on this journey with us. Yeah. So if new partners come in, right, I believe we can integrate much faster compared to our.
Yeah, perfect. Good. Thank you for that. So, after all those questions, I think we're now at a point where we really understand everything, how Cathay came to the point where they decided to go ahead with the digital fueling project and integrate with the A-Fuel hub, and then of course choosing Shell as a partner because they have already integrated with the hub, and that makes everything a lot faster, and that a lot of problems that might occur have already been sorted out through previous integrations. For the next part of the session, I would like to really go into the details of the technical project. But to give the audience a little bit of a better understanding before doing that, I would like to just quickly share my screen with all of you to give you a better understanding of what it really means when an airline and an interplaner communicates via the A-Fuel hub. about their fueling process, because I think the two of you already touched on that as well, that we're utilizing the AIDX XML scheme that is publicated by the IATA to facilitate the whole project, the process. So as I already said, so we have basically the airline in that case Cathay, and the interplaner in that case Shell on the two sides of on the two ends of the communication, let's say. And normally, of course, this process would work kind of manually, phone calls, paper-based receipts and everything. And now all this can become digital and way faster. And the idea of that is, of course, that the A-Fuel hub becomes that middleman that allows a fast integration for the interplaner and a fast integration for the airline as well, and gives both parties to basically exchange this part in terms of Cathay and this part in terms of Shell, and exchange it with another partner. So for Cathay, of course, they could use another interplaner on here because that is connected to the A-Fuel hub, and the same thing goes with Shell. They could use the A-Fuel hub to communicate to other airlines, and all that can be done in such a short time because the integration with the middleman is already there. So the idea here is really that the first message of the AIDX scheme, that's the fuel order, that is sent out by the airline, by the pilot across the hub towards the interplaner. So the interplaner now knows which plane at what time needs to be fueled, what amount of gasoline, of kerosene. So then, of course, this order has to be acknowledged by the interplaner so that the airline in the end knows that everything worked as intended. So, and that they can go forward with the process as usual, basically. So, and then at one point, the interplaner can communicate different progress messages of this fueling process. For example, the truck has left the station. It has arrived at the aircraft. It has started fueling, and all that. So this can be done as detailed as the interplaner likes to. So this is really up to the interplaner, and of course, in communication with the airline, what kind of information they need at what point in the process. So this is, of course, always sent over to the pilot or the airline itself, so that they always know at what point in time in the process we are. So, and then of course we have a fuel summary. That's the message where basically the receipt, the e-ticket that tells that gives the information of what has been done by the interplaner. So how much has been fueled at what time, when has the fueling been finished, and all this information that needs to be sent over to the airline. And of course, this is usually done on a paper slip that in the end, of course, needs to be signed, and all those steps that are now completely digital, because the fuel summary can be acknowledged by a fuel summary acknowledgement message and sent over to the interplaner. So in the end, there's really no personal interaction needed, no need to wait for a pilot to give them a signature, no need for maybe a printer fails. We know how printers work. They never work as intended, for example. And all that becomes digital, and this message exchange is, of course, as you see it on here, some kind of standardized. So you have the different message types that can be communicated, but the details in those messages can slightly vary from pilot, from airline to interplaner, and how they would like to communicate. But all those information, of course, can be facilitated by this message, because we have free text fields and all that. So in the end, the fueling process that an airline has in place can always be depicted by this process, and the interplaner can always deliver the information the airline needs, and vice versa. So this is really what I wanted to show you before going into the technical details of the project that Cathay and Shell went through for at Singapore at Singapore Airport. So let me go back, stop the sharing and erase that headache creating thing for you. So now we're back. I hope it all worked. I didn't hear any complaints from your side, so I think everything went through as expected. To you, David, after having clarified the general message flow, I would like to come back and focus on what that really means for the parties involved. So what did you have to do on your side, especially because it was the first time you're doing it, working with this scheme and message flow? What did you have to do on your side to basically speak that language? So speak AIDX. What was the technical bits and pieces that you had to do?
Okay. Yeah. So according to your previous presentation, it looks, it looks simpler than what we actually need to do. I mean, before we start the enabling the e-fueling. So in the presentation only have the pilot and also the into plane agent. But actually for Cathay Pacific, before we start before we start to enable the digital review, we actually need to involve multiple parties into the discussion before we really start and go ahead. So first of all, we will need to involve the flight operation department. We also need to involve the field procurement department and also the finance department. We need to understand the existing procedure for the manual fuel uplift from the flight operational department and see how we can map the message flow without changing too much of the current operation model. I mean, for the manual process. On top of it, we have reviewed the potential benefit that can be created with the new technology as well for the digital review. We also need to understand from the field procurement department the potential benefit for them from the field cost point of view, of course. And moreover, we need to discuss with our finance department to understand, how the new process will impact our payment systems. Okay, so this is the discussion internal within Cathay Pacific. And also, of course, we also need to cooperate with ID1. We need to discuss with ID1 on how we can set up integration channel between ID1 and our Cathay Pacific platform. And for our own IT department, we need to discuss, with our own IT teams and also our UX design team, how we can enable the message exchange function in our EFF application in a user-friendly way. We also need to discuss with our product owner to discuss, about the expected message flow and system behavior. And one of the most important topics is not interpreting any existing operational procedure for our pilots, because for our pilots, they have been using the same operational procedure for a long time already. So we do not want to introduce, anything that really interrupt the existing procedure that have been operating for decades and proven to be, working and efficiency. Of course, we also need to work with Shell and SAP. So SIX has gone through a few meetings with Shell, like what Johnson just mentioned, and also Shell SAP ID1 to understand the technical requirement and also the system behavior of Skypack. We have asked questions about the behavior for under different scenarios to confirm that there's no gap on the expectation before we start the real integration and also the development.
All right, David, thank you for those insights.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
as expected, of course, there are a lot of departments that need to be talked to when starting such a process, and that the fueling process itself, all the processes that you have in place for years and years, that they should be not touched at that point, just to digitalize something, but that the digital project needs to adapt to this to the processes you have. And I think as you can see that this is always possible. So the scheme and everything allows the adaptation to every fueling process that airlines have in place. So there's no need to, so you don't need to be scared of needing to change your processes. You just make it. I think that's very one very important message there.
Yeah. And also one thing I would like to call out, even though in my previous answer, I mentioned a lot of steps and also a lot of party involved there, but I just want to call that, actually we only need to that once. That's it. Then for the future, enabling new airports, no need to go through all those. Just coordinate with the interplaying agent. If they have already integrated with ID1, then we can already talk with ID1. I mean the AFU hub almost immediately.
Here we are again, scalability.
Yeah. Okay.
Johnson, of course, Shell already has know how to use the AIDX scheme. Everything has been in place with previous integration. But what is it meant to do it with Shell? I think in previous talks we had, you mentioned that training the operators at the ground was one very important point for you as well, right?
Yeah. So I think just a few points I will echo what David has talked about, right? So we had to ensure, or rather have a degree of confidence that we don't break the other processes and the other systems. And I think the operations team became very, very important as well, especially because, so like what David said, as you go to another airport and you introduce this integration at another airport, from a software point of view, it is very much simpler, right, compared to just but it's not so simple when it comes to asking operators to pick up a new digital solution. Yeah, operators have been doing the paper-based ticket receipts for a very long time, right? It takes time to then train them and help them understand what to expect, what kind of responses to expect from the pilot, what kind of responses needs to be sent to the pilot, right? So to us, it is a slight change in the operating procedures, which we do have to adapt based on each airport. Because again, just like every airline has a slightly different way of operating, right? On the airports, each interplane agent or interplane party has a different way of operating as well, right? So while the Shell network has kind of a standardized operating procedure, there will always be kind of nuances on the ground that we do have to watch out for. Yeah, so I think the software part, like you and David has said, right, from a scalability point of view, I will call it a switch on for the next airport that we want to integrate together. If it's the integration has been done before, right, the cloud-based integration has been done before. But from our point of view, then we do need time to make sure our operators are trained and understand what's going on. Because they will then be working with two sets of processes, if you think about it, right? The guy on the ground, for Cathay flights, for example, they will be doing it digitally. But for the rest who are not yet on the journey of digitalization, they still have to go back to the paper-based ticket. So there could be some confusion for our guys. Yeah. So I think this is where there's a big watch point, right? And I think one other thing we'd like to also point out is that through this integration with Cathay as well, right, we realized that there are further improvements to efficiency, right? For example, we spoke to Cathay and we discussed whether service level 2, that means operator, that means the setting of the fuel panels on the plane, can be transferred to the operator instead of the engineer, or in some cases, in some airlines, it's a pilot doing it, right? So instead of us, after receiving a fuel order, based on your message flow just now, after receiving a fuel order, instead of having to wait for the SL2 service level to be performed, can my operator do it and carry on with refueling? That saves us a lot more time on the apron as well, right? So that also allows us to then not have to wait, and and we can then very naturally move on with the whole process of fueling. Yeah, so I think this all helps with operational efficiency. So I think the big thing that Shell is always looking at is how do we operate more efficient, but just as safely. Yeah. So one of the things that we identified here, and I think different airports have different service level performance. I think in terms of in Asia, I think generally we observe that most ITPs only do service level 1, right? So then we realize that service level 2 plus this integration actually makes it more efficient. I think in European airports, mostly the ITPs are already doing service level 2, right? So I think that then it became not so much a big issue. Yeah, so I think nuances on the ground, we do have to take note of, right? And I think it becomes very much more a people type of training problem more than a software thing. So like David said, the software thing is all done. It's a one-time pain, right? And then after that, scalability-wise, you can switch on the next airport, switch on the next airport. But when you switch on, then you need to make sure your pilots and operators know what's going on. Yeah.
All right. as I said again, so it's all about scalability. Doing that once at an airport, you're done with it for forever. Good. Now, Dave, back to you for because you were the party that needed, as I said, to learn how to use the AIDX scheme. You already talked about how many departments you had to talk with or get on board with. But what does it mean technically for your system to integrate this communication flow? Because I believe, or let's better say I know, because I can be honest with that, I know it, that there is, of course, that your system needs some kind of interface to receive data and send out data. So what was it a huge deal for your IT department to implement that technical communication, or was it a breeze?
Okay. So first of all, for the technical integration, that is not complicated. Honestly, is more easier than what we originally thought. So for us, I think the most challenging part is not technical related. The most difficult part for us is about the pre-analysis period, that we need to understand all the existing process with the related parties, and also about the related systems. Other than that, our IT department also have to understand the IATA standard on the e-fueling, because this is something new to us, because we didn't have any knowledge about that, IATA standard on the e-fueling previously. So we need to spend some time to study about the standard. But anyway, for the technical part is much smoother than what we expected. I think because of multiple reasons. The first reason is because SAP has already established the integration with the AFuel Hub before we start the project with CX. So it makes the work much simpler. And also for us, we just need to build the integration with ID1. Then that's it. And if I remember correctly, the whole development take us, the real period for the development took us only 2 weeks to complete. And then moreover, on top of that, we have got a great support from ID1 through the development stage, because they have shared a lot of their knowledge to us. And also thank you very much for Johnson. They also share a lot of their previous experience for us as well.
No
Great.
problems, David.
Yeah.
As you said, we're now have talked a lot about that as soon as the integration is established, it can be reused, and that the process can be adjusted to so many airline-specific processes. And in the end, of course, it all comes down to the testing efforts that the two parties we are talking about right now in specific can communicate in a way we would like to expect. So of course, I think for you, Johnson, first, there needed to be some tweaks to the whole to adjust to the processes that Cathay is using. So maybe give us a quick and short insight on that. And then after this, of course, I want to hear a little bit from your experience of how the whole testing process went through from the perspective of YouTube.
Yeah. So generally our Shell Aviation's position has always been to adopt IATA AIDX standard, right? So so that every integration is harmonized, right? And therefore, like we talked about a few times here, it is scalable, right? Because if you go to customize for everyone, then I think cost-wise, it's not going to be sustainable. Yeah. However, I do need to say that there are minute details that are not specified enough in the standard, and therefore requires us to bilaterally agree with Cathay how to deal with them, right? So I think one example that came to mind was the issue around prefixes and suffixes for flight numbers, right? And I think there isn't it wasn't really specified, right? And we had to bilaterally agree how do we deal with it. Yeah. So however, I don't remember any major tweaks, right? I think these are very minor ones, which I believe in future as we are all part of the IATA data standards, the fuels data standards group, right? So I think that will definitely be discussed and resolved, I believe, in future, right? So there isn't major tweaks that would make the integration unsustainable or make it a challenge to scale. Yeah, so I think not much to tweak. Basically, it's copy paste most of the time, right? With small bilateral agreements, just because there isn't it wasn't very specified yet. Yeah. So I think do you want me to touch on testing as well right now?
Yeah. Well, why don't you continue, and then we go over to David for his perspective.
Yeah. So I think from the perspective of testing, I think if people on the call have gone through a IT project before, right, you will know that there are a lot of different stages of testing along the way, right? From layman terms, right, I call it testing in office and then testing on the actual site, right? And I think COVID then becomes a real challenge, yeah? When we test in the office, when David is sitting in his office, I'm sitting in my office, everything works. We know that, right? The Wi-Fi is strong, the 4G signal is strong, right? And it's all top notch. I think, although I still lost signal just now. But at the apron, for some reason, right, there are blind spots, the 4G doesn't work, or the 3G doesn't work. The Wi-Fi isn't transmitting any data, and I think it's a real phenomenon if you ask me, right? Given all the infrastructure in place already, right? From an airport point of view, so the real challenge came in when we had to do on-site testing. Two real challenges. Number one was COVID. Number two was internet connectivity, right? Ideally, David and I should have been at Changi Airport doing a few rounds of tests first on the ground, before we introduce them to the pilots and the operators. But obviously, I'm based in Singapore, right? And we are doing it at Changi Airport, so it's easy for me, but it's not so easy for David. We had to adapt, right? I think David had to request his pilots to test the systems out for him, right? Which was, I think from an IT project management point of view, you don't really do that until you finish as much UAT as possible. But of course, we have to adapt, right? And I think from a signal strength point of view, locally we did test the whole signal strength around the entire Changi Airport. During the testing and go live, right? Due to COVID, the flights for Cathay was shifted from one terminal to another. So the lucky thing was that we shifted to a terminal where the signal strength was strong, right? But we know on the ground that the signal strength on the other terminal where Cathay originally was is a little bit weaker, right? So I think as we recover, right, this is going to be one watch point for us as well. Yeah, and I think various airports have different blind spots, right? But this is something that we kind of discover when on the ground when you do the testing. Yeah, so I think if you think about it, software is easy, training is easy, and then connectivity doesn't work, and then you have to call up your telecom provider to talk about, hey, what's going on and all that. Yeah, so I think these are the unique things that happen, right? So you may think that everything is in place, and then the most simple 4G connection fails. Yeah, so I think there's some very interesting bits to consider, right? I think for the audience here as well.
That's true. Well, nothing to blame. That to be honest, that's not a problem that we can blame on the three of us, let's say. But
yeah,
all know that something like this can happen basically everywhere. So yeah, David, a quick take from your side. Johnson already mentioned that you were the person basically to struggle the most situation. How did you experience it?
Okay. So yeah. So for us, we believe the testing is actually one of the most critical steps for all the parties to confirm what we have done is working correctly and also matching the expectation. So from my point of view, that a comprehensive test plan, prepare in advance is very important. So for us, we have created a list of test cases to try to cover as many different scenarios as we can. And also we have also listed our expected behavior for those test cases to share with Shell and ID1 for review before we start the testing. And also it's also related to the point that Johnson just mentioned, because with the current test standard, right? So it cannot really cover all different scenarios. So when we walk through those those test cases, we also discussed when the system or the IATA standard is not able to handle those test cases. So how should we adjust our procedure to fulfill the requirement? Yeah. So anyway, so this step can help all the parties to understand the scope of the testing, and also a better estimation about the time required to complete all the test cases. It also helps to clarify the expected business procedure for both Shell and CX to handle some special scenarios before our testing. I also agree with Johnson that the COVID is causing us challenge for the on-site testing before going live. Moreover, I would like to mention that not only there is fine-tune to the system required, but also agree with Johnson that proper training to the user is also very important. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for those insights. After those takes, it might sound that it is a very testing process, a very long and hard way to go away to go down that path and really finish the project. But so to get the audience back on track, basically, let's get a very quick question out of the way, because maybe that helps to put it all in reference. So from the first technical meeting that Shell and Cathay had up until the go live of the implementation, how long did it take for you? And always have in mind that, of course, Shell had vision in place, but for Cathay it was the first time. So how long was it, David?
Okay. Yep. So if I remember correctly, I think we started our first conversation with Shell by about the end of March. And then we start the development in June. And as what I mentioned previously, the development took us about 2 weeks to finish. And then after all the testing, then we go live in October.
All right. So basically, end of March for beginning of October. That was the whole time frame for you.
Yep. And I think for the first 2 or 3 months is more like a touch base and also discussion about the plan, how we can move forward. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So this is of course a very reasonable time frame, and as you said, taking into account that you had the first 3 months of talking to all the departments that you mentioned in one of the answers before, figuring everything out on how to move forward with the implementation and all that. Yeah. So with that in mind, now the project has gone live in October. We're now in April in 2021. So Johnson, over to you first. What is your resume of that? How did it go? Did it surpass expectation? What is your take on having completed the project with Cathay together?
So I think it's been a good experience so far, right? And I think we are regularly in touch with the operations guy on the ground. There are no hiding. There are still issues that we are fixing, right? So I think testing can only cover like 95 to 99% of all scenarios, but there are always that 1% that happens when things go live, right? Nothing too drastic, right? I think things are still working. We are really happy with this integration, right? I think we've been pushing for data exchange for the longest time because we believe in the benefits that came out of it. And I think we are starting to see these benefits being realized today, right? So I think this had been a really great journey, right? Bumps here and there. But having worked with information design before, and I think given our long-standing relationship between Shell and Cathay Pacific as well, I think the whole project was very well organized, right? And I think the results really prove that, right? This type of projects typically involve a large number of stakeholders, right, in both the supplier side and the customer side, right? So I think having the ability for us to orchestrate this jointly has been a really key success. I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but most of the integrations are successful so far. Right, we had some teething issues, but right now I would say it has matched, or I would even say it has exceeded expectations on the ground. Yeah.
Perfect.
David, maybe you want to share your thoughts?
Yes.
Over to you.
Yeah. So I totally agree with Johnson, and actually, the outcome is actually much better than what we originally expected. So I think the first reason is because Skypack has already integrated with Aviation. So it means that in theory, Shell does not need to do too much extra to enable that integration. So for CX, we just need to establish the integration with the Aviation hub once. It helps making all the work simpler. And also another reason is I also mentioned previously. It seems Aviation hub is quite stable so far. And also the last reason is definitely the team from Shell and also ID1 was being very helpful throughout the whole process, because you guys have more experience than us, right? So you have learned from your previous experience. So thank you very much for your support during the whole implementation period.
That's what we, as a middleman, you always have to connect the two. So always have to help in that regard. And from my side, I can tell, I can join that feedback. It was really a pleasure having the two of you, the two parties, deciding to go forward with that project, and then of course also the project itself was smooth sailing from us. Of course, we always have the task in the middle to facilitate the whole testing communication and everything. Yeah, but overall it was really smooth sailing, and most importantly, of course, if the two parties, so in that case Shell and Cathay, are happy how it went through, I think we did a good job. And it also shows in the stability of the project, in the product itself, as David mentioned earlier. I think he is now, speakers and bandwidth too low, video reconnect automatically. Okay, but I think, David, you can hear us still, right?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you,
right.
can you guys hear me?
We can't see you, but we can hear you. That's all good.
Oh,
We have
oh really? Okay.
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 The bandwidth is insufficient, but all good. As long as we can still. Now you're back, even perfect.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, good. So one final question before we move to the questions of the audience, because I can already see that there are some. Of course, now we have the integration. We already talked about that you can scale it, that you can use it at many different airports, for many different interplanes, for many different airlines. But talking about the two of you, what are your joint plans in the future to expand the usage of the integration that you have in place currently?
Yeah, I think I mean, from Shell's perspective, we are so glad to have a partner like Cathay Pacific, right? I think our networks overlap quite a bit, right? So I think, David, correct me if I'm wrong, but we are looking at other airports, Manchester and Dubai, I think, right? Of course, once flight activity resumes, right? So I think once we reach herd immunity, as I hear on the news, right? I think things go back to normal. I think IATA thinks it's 2024, right? As we kind of recover as an industry, right? I think these are the two next airports that we are looking at, right? And I think we won't stop there, right, David? Correct me if I'm wrong again, right? But we won't stop there. Hopefully, we grow this along the way, right? So I think we've proven in Singapore that it can be done, even in a pandemic world, right? With a lot of coordination and time allowance, right? So we are very much looking forward to going live in other airports around the world.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Anything to add?
Yep. So I agree with Johnson. But just double confirm, you guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
It works. All good.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So I totally agree with Johnson. So we definitely would like to partner with Shell to expand the legwork. And also for Cathay Pacific, our plan for this year is continuing to expand our scope of e-fueling as many as possible. We already have a long list of airports that we would like to enable the digital refill for this year. Definitely some of the airports under Shell are already in our top priority for our list. And also, this is our pleasure to be able to partner with Shell and ID1 to enable the e-fueling in Singapore. Yeah.
Perfect. We are always here for that. So with that, we come to the end of our question round. But as I mentioned, we already have some questions from the audience. So I just don't want to close the session right now, but come over and check out the questions from the audience. So first of all, from Daniel from the IATA, because I get that out of the way. It's rather a comment than a question. We will be more than happy if the IATA Fuel Data Standard Group to receive input on which needs are not covered by the standard. We would incorporate them. So this really goes out to the two of you, to all other people in the audience. If you are willing to expand the standard and really see the use of that, and really want to make it the perfect standard to cover everything that in regard to fueling, connect with Daniel and join the Fuel Data Standard Group, so we can really get all the experts in that group to progress to improve the standard even further in the future. So let's see, what are the ones with the most upvotes? Okay, so I'll go with the one from Dimitri first. That's directed at you, David. So he asks, do your local authorities require electronic signature in the fuel delivery tickets, or do you duplicate it in paper at the moment?
Oh, okay. No. So for us, basically, because like what you show in your slides, so once we receive the digital fuel ticket, then there will acknowledgement send it back to the independent agent, right? So for us, that acknowledgement already represent the digital signature. Yeah. So there's no need for us.
All right.
Let's just chip in here. So I think for Dimitri, I know of airports where the local authorities require signature on paper, and not the electronic signature, right? So I've experienced this. I think if I'm not wrong, in Marseille, right? And I think a long journey to work with the authorities to change that. Yeah. But most other airports that I've dealt with so far does not require specifically an electronic signature or a physical signature. Typically, it is either an airline requirement or a internal shell requirement to have, say, the operator sign on the either electronically or in the case of paper on the paper itself. But yeah, so I think not many authorities that I come across with that require such signatures. So.
All right. Just as a little sneak peek, we with Afuel are currently working on also implementing a feature to support electronic signature. So stay tuned. We will inform all of you as soon as we are progressing with that to a beta stage, so you can all use that if you need it at in the country you're operating in, of course, as we just heard. So Rizat is asking, I think, David, you've covered that already, and Johnson, maybe you as well. Have you experienced any data loss during the fuelings, which could have an impact on a smooth operations? And if so, how do you handle this?
Okay, maybe Johnson, you go first.
Sure. So data loss, yes, right. I think I spoke about this at length, and I have not met an airport that does not have a blind spot. Yeah, surprisingly. We fall back to the manual process, right? Most of my operators, say in Singapore right now, they are familiar with both the manual process and the digital process. If the digital one doesn't work, we go back to manual and we inform the airline representative immediately that it is not working. Yeah, so it's quite obvious when it doesn't work, right? So you can stand there for 5 minutes and nothing just comes through, right? And then you just naturally talk to the airline representative on the ground to figure out what's going on. And when the most important thing is to not let such data loss cause a delay, right? And I think that will be loss of. We all know delays cost money to the airline, right? And I think there's a lot of follow-up investigations after that as well. So typically when there is a data loss, we advise our operators to quickly move to the manual one, just to make sure things move smoothly.
All right.
David?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So for me, I agree with Johnson. So yeah. So lab work, we cannot guarantee they are always 100% stable. Even though for this meeting is not that stable. But anyway, we always have the backup procedure, which is the manual process that we used to use previously, right? So if we find anything not working, then we will just fall back to the previous manual process. And I think one point that Johnson called out that is very important is making sure that you have set that the correct expectation. For example, you have set that 5 minutes as expectation. Then over 5 minutes, then if nothing happened, then immediately fall back to the manual process, so that making sure the whole process is still smooth and will not cause any delay for the flights.
All right. Then
yeah, but at the same time, I just want to mention that other than the internet connectivity, issue, sometimes majority of the cases okay. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Another question from Daniel, but I think we will cover that later in your individual presentation, because he's asking what are the business benefits for CX and that they can derive from the digitalization. We will cover that later. And Christian also asked about your common plans of Cathay and Shell in terms of building connections in Asia. You already covered that, or do you have any? So you're looking at the, especially at the Shell Skype locations in Asia to connect them in the near future, right?
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Perfect. Good. So this was quite a long session, but I hope that we delivered all the insights to the audience that they were looking for.